Alrighty. Welcome everybody to this session. We're going to be talking about automating ransomware, remediating with the VMware Carbon Black Cloud SDK. Just as a disclaimer, some of this information may be in progress as well as future work. So just a quick note. A quick agenda today. We're going to talk about some ransomware and today, some of the things that are going through the news, a little bit about VMware Carbon Black and the resources we have, and then we'll go through into the demo. So ransomware today, the news is certainly always exploding with all kinds of different ransomware attacks. It's one of the more prevalent attacks that is hitting the news. It's been hitting the healthcare organizations, universities, it's been hitting giant companies, and we're still seeing some fallout from the Colonial Pipeline that impacted a large portion of the East Coast. They're investigating for different pieces of information that were stolen and then now being potentially sold off, so all the customer information they had. We also see that there's been an increase, triple digits, according to HelpNet Security, in the number of ransomware attacks. A quote from Christopher Krebs, who's was a previous director of the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency as part of Homeland Security. What he has said during a committee early in May was what was considered a low-dollar online nuisance crime only a few short years ago, ransomware has exploded into a multi-billion-dollar global racket that threatens the delivery of the very services so critical to helping us collectively get through the COVID pandemic. To put it simply, we are on the cusp of a global pandemic of a different variety, driven by a greed and avoidably vulnerable digital ecosystem and ever-widening criminal enterprise. This is predominantly evident with a lot of the targets being healthcare organizations and it putting them out of business or putting them in a very harmful situation where they are supporting the companies or the patients they are supporting. We have from the HHS organization a list of all the different sectors as well as some of the common amounts they've seen for bills and costs to businesses while rectifying ransomware attacks. Specifically, the healthcare industry is on the lower end at 1.27 million US dollars, but we can see all the way up to education, which one of the news articles was one of the universities is up to 2.73 million. And these are just rough numbers, estimates according to all the data they've fetched and have seen from various remediation attacks. But it's clearly a costly attack at the moment, and we see it trending upwards year to year. This year in particular has gone up quite significantly. So what can VMware Carbon Black offer? To start off, we do have a new VMware Carbon Black Cloud malware lab. This is a kind of tutorial and walkthrough of the Carbon Black Cloud product, as well as a couple different cases where you can run some sample malware pieces in a VM that is provided. So I definitely recommend taking a look at it if you haven't and want to get familiar with some of the options and visibility that we are able to show and stop using the Carbon Black Cloud. The link is just below, so if you want to navigate to that, it's an article that'll walk you through the experience. The other thing to note about ransomware is the first line of defense is our policy configurations. In order to block them before even getting in the door or taking any significantly harmful actions, our policies will help prevent that from occurring. And then you can follow up with the remediation actions we'll talk about in a little bit. So these are three articles or three sets of articles that we have. The endpoint standard policy tuning, good, better, and best is part of our new Carbon Black VMware Tech Center or tech resources. So I definitely recommend taking a look at that. This is good for getting that kind of base configuration, which will help more than just ransomware, but will provide that strong support to help protect you. And then specifically, we have added ransomware additions and features. This second article will help block and protect you from those. There's a couple different levels of them. There's a standard kind of base level, which will prevent a lot of things, but will also leave your organization open for less restrictions in order to allow for PowerShell and some of the other tools that some of your developers may be using, or other different IT admins. So there's some varieties in the levels of aggression on how much it locks down. And then lastly, the threat research docs. Our threat research team create Tautons. These will target and focus on various attacks that have happened in the market. And some of them will provide various policy adjustments, as well as threat intelligence that you can add to watch lists and other areas to detect if something does occur. So this is something we do recommend subscribing to. They'll post some every couple weeks, depending on what attacks are going on in the area. So definitely recommend taking a look at that. Something a lot of people have watched lately is Mr. Robot with all the different attacks and things that he does in there. One thing that I found particularly interesting is one of the quotes from the show is, people always make the best exploits. I've never found it hard to hack most people. If you listen to them, watch them, the vulnerabilities are like neon signs screwed into their foreheads. So something to note is, as much as all the policy configurations and security software out there, people are often the target through phishing and whatnot. So things will happen and you will need to remediate and take action. So today in our demo, we'll go through some of those things that we can do with the Carbon Black Cloud Python SDK. So I'll hand it over to Bella, and she can walk us through.
Thanks, Alex. Okay. So I'm going to present a short demo using the Python SDK so that we can investigate certain attacks, and we can do some actions to mitigate or remove such malicious software. But let's see first what we can do using the Python script, and then I'm going to walk through the code and explain what it actually does. So the script has two options. The first one is just to find remote desktop or SSH connections from devices without a sensor. This option is going to offer us the ability to install a sensor. So we can check those, and if there are devices without sensors, we're going to see that we need to install a sensor. The second option includes more things, like first, we're offering to the user what kind of alerts they would like to get. In this case, let's say that we care about the alerts with severity at least 4. For certain attacks, the severity might be different, so it's up to you what kind of severity you're going to choose. And after that, for each of the alerts that are found, we can see a little information so that we can start our investigation. Also, the other thing that is checked, whether for the specific alert and for the specific device, there is an increase in file modifications. If there is, then this is a hint that maybe something harmful was done to our device. And after that, we have a few options that is going to be shown for each, of course, alert that we can choose from. The first two options are kind of less invasive than the others. For example, we can just say do nothing because the alert was not generated because of malicious event. We can also send an email to just change the credentials or reimage. And the rest of the options here are actually doing something with the Python SDK. The first one, the first option is to add that process to the watch list. This is something we can do if we think that this might be a malicious process, but we are not absolutely sure that it is. So what we can do is create a watch list and a report with this process as an indicator of compromise, and continue watching that process. The next option is actually banning the process, which means that the moment this process is started, it's going to be blocked, which is pretty good, because if this process is indeed a malicious process, it's going to be blocked. The next three options are more invasive than those two. The next one is actually changing the policy of the device. If we think that this policy that the device is using at this moment is not strict enough and it's allowing malicious software to be installed or run on our computer, we should change the policy. The next option is deleting the file directly from the machine. We're going to talk about live response in a minute. And finally, we can just quarantine the device if we think it was indeed a virus was installed on that machine. So let's, for example, choose the fourth option to see what is going to be done. So the process has been added to the blacklist. We're not going to do this for all of the alerts because I would like you to show you how easy all of this can be done with the Python SDK. So the first thing that we have mentioned is actually checking for events that originated based on some remote desktop or SSH connections. The thing we need to do in order for us to get all of such events is just query the enriched events and set a criteria that we would like to get only the netcon events. Of course, we can filter out by range and other things like a device or anything. But for this demo, we just care about all of the events that are netcon events. After that, it's good to check whether there is a sensor that is installed on the device, which is done with just one line, this one, and just a simple select. If this results into 0 devices, this means that there is no sensor installed on that machine. The more interesting part of this demo was the second part, which is getting the alerts. For the demo, we're grabbing just the alerts that were generated in the last day, but of course you can grab the alerts for the last week or month. It's up to you. Then what we're offering here, the user, is to get the trends. Let's see how to get the trends. Well, we are getting all of the enriched events that were generated first in the last week prior to the alert and for the day of the alert. Why we are doing that? Because we'd like to check whether the average for the last week is not smaller than the number of file modifications for the current day or for the day of the alert. Based on that, we can say whether there is an increase in file modifications, because this is one of the indicators that something malicious is installed on our device. And we can do that by just, again, selecting the enriched events that we care about. And in this case, they're of type file mode. And because we care about a certain device, we can also filter by device ID. The next thing we are doing here is actually checking the device status, because if the device is in status bypass, this means that it's kind of vulnerable to any malicious software that can be installed. So far, we have explained how we are doing the initial investigation and what are the initial messages. But after that, we've offered the users to apply different actions. For example, we have offered this process to be added to a watch list. And we can do that by just creating a watch list with a builder, then creating a report in a similar manner, and adding that process as an indicator of compromise. So it's kind of a few lines that is doing a lot for our investigation, especially for the future one. Then the next option that we have offered is banning the process. It can be done even easier than the adding to a watch list. How? We are just creating a reputation override and we are adding that process to the blacklist. That's it. And that will result into blocking that process every time it's run on our device. The next option that we have offered is actually changing the policy. Of course, we need to have the device. So we're just selecting the device with a single line of code. And then if we know, of course, the ID of the policy, we can directly update the policy. But in this demo, we are just grabbing all of the policies and allowing the user to pick a policy. Of course, we need to know what kind of policies we have created and which are most strict or loosened, so that we'll know which policy to choose. The part that is kind of a lot interesting than the others is actually using live response. What is a live response? Creating a session between our device to our remote machine, and we can apply different actions. We can not just delete a file, but we can upload files, we can start files, we can start processes or kill processes, and a lot of other actions. So with live response, we can definitely do a more elaborated scenarios for hunting for some malicious software. In this particular case, we are just selecting the device and we are starting a session. So with just 2 lines of code, we're starting a session to the remote device, and we can do a whole bunch of things so that we can mitigate some harmful software or action that is done on our device. Usually, if we would like to do it with API calls, we need to start the session and check when it's completed, and a lot of code needs to be written around this. But with the Python SDK, we are just using 2 lines of code. After we have started the session, we just need a single command to delete the file. And we are just passing the full path of the file so that we can complete the operation. And that's it. We don't need anything else. So it's simple as that. And finally, quarantining the device is even simpler. It's done with 2 lines of code, just selecting the device that we would like to quarantine and just invoking the quarantine method. That's it. After that, we can figure out what happened to our device, and if everything is fine, we can definitely undo this operation afterwards. So this was for the demo. Please take your survey, and this concludes our presentation. So thank you for your attention.